Hello Artcadets and welcome to this week's video. Today we are going to be using paints to draw joy from inside out. Any paints will do. I am using gouache paints, I think that's how you pronounce it, which are slightly thicker than watercolours, but you can use acrylics, poster paint, anything you have. We're also going to use some thicker paper because with paints and water you don't really want to be using really thin paper. So this is a mixed media paper from Hobbycraft or your local art store, and that's a lot better because it's thicker. The other things you will need is a palette, some paintbrushes and some kitchen towel. I always have 2 jars of water as well, one for initially cleaning a brush and the other one for finally cleaning it off. So some water and some paintbrushes will do fine. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I've had a request to show how to draw hands, so I'll be doing another video separately for that, and that will be coming up soon, so look out for it. I'm going to do it as an Artcadets extra video, so yeah, keep your eyes open for that. But for now, let's get on with the painting. So to start with, I'm going to draw an egg shape for Joy's head. I'm doing it slightly on an angle because she's not just facing forward. Once I've done this egg shape, I'm then just going to draw a couple of lines horizontally and vertically to show where her hair is going to be. The lines I've drawn from the top of her head down the middle of the egg shape is going to be where the centre of her face is, and that's where I put the nose. The line horizontally across from the left to the right is going to mark where her eyes are. Now both her eyes aren't exactly the same shape because this is a side view of her, so make sure that the eye you draw that's furthest away is slightly smaller and rests up against the nose, as you can see in the picture. To do the rest of the picture, I've started off with drawing her arms this time because that will then help me place where her body's going to be. So the arm on the side that I'm drawing there is just a big long curve, and that, if you carry it on down, shows you where her back's going to be because she's stretching out nice and tall. I've then drawn the legs in line with the top of, not with the top of her hands, but in line with her hands, and her feet are quite simple and straightforward. To do the hands, I just started with a little circle, and that marks where the things are going to be attached to. I am going to do the separate video on how to draw hands because I think that will be helpful, and it has been a request from someone. After the hands, I'm just going in to do details on the hair and the dress. Part of the hair comes over her eye there, and when you're going in to do the details, just remember that you can still see part of the eyebrow and the rest of the eye underneath. And then map out the guidelines and get ready for the painting. So for the painting, I've mixed up a flesh colour here. If you haven't, I started off with a flesh coloured paint, but if you haven't got that, that's no problem. You can mix that up using a bit of orange and some white and a little bit of yellow, possibly even a little bit of red depending on what colour you're going for. I added some yellow and a tiny bit of orange to my flesh colour to get the colour I wanted, and then started off by doing an initial layer all over the areas of skin. The good thing about paint is, as you can see I'm doing here, is you can add a tiny bit more water if you feel like the colour you've put down is too dark. You can only do this while it's still wet, but then some of the colour lifts off and you can almost erase, if you like, some of the colour that you put on there. So then I'm going on to do some shading on her face and arms, and I'm just using a watered down orange colour, and that I'm just going to put under the areas that would be in shadow. You can add a little bit of water once you've put down that darker colour to blend it in so there's not a harsh line. So remember, the darker areas would be those that are in the shade, so her legs underneath the skirt, and if the light's coming from the right hand side of the picture, then under the arms on the left hand side of the picture would be in shadow too. I'm adding a slightly pink colour to her cheeks there and just watering it down so it's not too obvious, but you get a little hint of colour there. Now for the blue, I did have quite a good blue that I just used neat, but as you can see I've got a test piece of paper that I'm putting over the painting just to protect it, and also so that I can test the colours out and see if it's the colour I really want. I did add some water to make it a little less vibrant, but I wasn't so concerned about getting this really smooth layer on her hair because it is quite a messy style of hair. So after the initial light area of blue, I added a darker layer. Not all over, but just to give some different shades in her hair and make it look a bit more realistic. For her eyes, I just started off doing the whole pupil and iris in blue, and then once that's dry you can go in later and add the black areas of her eye and a bit more shading. Now for her lips, I mixed up a pinky colour, and you can do that with red and white, and I used a really fine paintbrush. Now not everyone's got a really fine paintbrush, so no problem. You can always mix media. That means you can use paint together with either a crayon or felt tip, and those generally will have finer points to them. So yeah, just a fine crayon or a fine felt tip, if you haven't got a fine paintbrush, will do fine. Should I say fine some more? Okay, for her dress I mixed up a yellow colour with a hint of green and a tiny bit of brown as well, because I wanted it to be sort of an almost limey colour with a hint of green. So have a play about with your colour palette and see what colours you can mix up. I covered the whole dress in the same colour to start with, and while it's still wet I went in with a little bit of a darker colour just on, again, the areas that would be in shadow. I think the only disadvantage, if there are any, with paints is that it's a good idea to let them dry in some instances and leave them wet in others. So if you're still blending in colours, it's really good to do it while it's still wet, but then as you'll see later when I'm adding the detail of Joy's dress, you need to have that dress dry, otherwise your colours will bleed and blend in together and you'll end up with a messy colour, and you won't get the fine lines that you will if you wait for it to dry. So once the hair's dry and I've gone in with some pure white paint and just done a few highlights with Joy's hair. She's got amazing hair that's got quite a lot of white highlights in it and dots, so I've added those with a very fine paintbrush. And again for the eyes, I've used a fine paintbrush to go in with the black, as I said. Once it's dry, if you haven't got a very fine paintbrush, you can just use a black fibre tip pen, felt tip or crayon. Again, with going around the outside of her eyes, this is really tricky even with a fine paintbrush, and I think I added some darker pencil colour to the painting at the end just to get that really smooth line. Now just a few touch-ups now because we're nearly there. I did some darker shading underneath her hair and around her neck, so the areas that would be in shadow, and went in with a third layer of even darker blue just to make it pop. Not all over her head, just in some areas, and then I also used that same technique for her eyes. So I'm adding a little bit of white highlight on the areas of the iris, and then on the other side I'm adding with a dark blue pencil some darker shading. Now for the pattern on her dress I used one of these water brush pens. They're really nifty, so if you can get hold of one of those that'd be really good. They're good fun to play around with. Basically you put the water in the top, dip your paintbrush end in the paint, and you can do really fine lines with it. To finish off with on Joy's hair, I'm just going in with my white gel pen and doing those little white dots that I said about that give her hair a real sparkle. There's also a white pattern on her dress that I just kind of made it up as I went along, looking at a few reference photos. It is a bit random, but it gives a really nice effect over that paint. But do remember to wait for the paint to dry first, otherwise it will make a bit of a mess. So like I said, if you haven't got a fine paintbrush, or if you want to do some last minute touch-ups, I've gone in with a dark blue pencil crayon, Prismacolor pencil, and just finished off the details around her eyes and a few highlights in her hair. To finish off then, I've just done a little bit of grey pencil over her mouth area as well. Well, that's all for today, Artcadets. I hope you've enjoyed drawing Joy in paints. If you've got any special requests for next week, then drop them in the comments box below. If you've liked the video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, a comment, and of course a subscribe. That would be really good. And next week we'll be doing more painting, so join us then. Bye for now.